Welcome back to another episode of Developing the Leader Within. And I am so excited today to have Wendy Pease from Rapport International with us. They focus on language and everything that deals with that with business. And so I am so excited to have her. I have a little bit of background in this, being in the Navy and having some international port visits. And we'll get into that in a little while. But Wendy, thank you so much for being with us today. It is so good to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I do know in terms of business how important language can be, especially on the legal side, right? But I have also experienced how important language could be on the national level. And being in the Navy for 26 years and basically going around the globe, hitting ports here and there, we often would get a port brief, which is meant to clarify some things in regards to the culture and the language and the practices of the nations we are going to visit. So I have a kind of a background in language and translation and all of those things. But you, with the founder, trainer, speaker, translation expert expertise that you have, what would you say? And before we get into that, can you give us a little history, maybe the passion behind Rapport International?
Sure. Well, I love languages and cultures. I lived internationally when I was young. I lived in Mexico, Taiwan, and the Philippines, and it's always opened me up to different cultures and languages. And the best saying that I heard about that is if you only speak one language or visit one country, it's like living in a mansion and never leaving one room. So there's so much to get out of visiting all these countries. And you just think about the words and the foods and the music and the entertainers and all that we get from all over the world these days. It just adds such a richness to our life. So I became the owner of Rapport International about 15 years ago. The company was founded in 1987, so over 30 years ago. And the owner was just ready to move on and do something else. And I looked at it and I went, oh, how cool. This takes all the stuff that I'm passionate about and puts it in. So here I am 15 years later, still doing it. We've grown every year. I've got a fabulous team that's working with me now. So I love going to work and figuring things out with them. And then working with clients to help them gain new markets or communicate clearly with employees or service patients or clients across different languages. So we've developed a lot of best practices and ways to connect across languages. So, and I love hearing your port visits. It's so important to know the subtleties when you're going into a new country.
Right. Yeah. Those things are held at the highest regard, especially when we're going abroad. Now,
Yeah.
those port visits for sailors are just, a break from the steel cages, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but uh, but for those that understand the value behind not only the language, the customs, but the value in relationship, because that's really
Yes.
where language could go astray. It
Yes.
could really sever a relationship that goes back centuries, and in one day, by one
Yeah.
false move, that could really jeopardize that. Now, our leaders are well aware that we have a lot of moving parts in our military, and they prepare for that, and they can overcome those things. But just
So I'm
imagine that.
curious, what was the most interesting thing that you learned about one of your port briefings before you went into whatever country it was?
Yeah, well, the most important thing was what did not translate equally between America and a foreign port. simple things as handshakes. Well, now that kind of gone away here for the for the little time that we're going to be in this situation with Corona. But
Yeah.
a simple thing as a handshake could go wrong. Some countries, they don't do that. Some countries do it with the opposite hand. It's amazing. And you, if you
Yeah.
don't know that, you could literally offend someone, and it could be at the highest level. So you have to know these customs. You have to
Yeah.
know what translates appropriately. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I realized that as an American going abroad, we mistake that everywhere we go is not America.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well, you know
So
what? Handshakes are really interesting. Do you know why the handshake got started? You
no,
ever
but
heard?
I'm. Hey, tell me.
Well, typically people are right dominant hand. No
Right,
respect to my left-handed child and my dad and all the other people.
my
But
wife.
typically people are right-handed dominant. So it was a way to put your hand out to say, I don't have a weapon, a sword or a gun in my hand. I'm shaking in a peaceful way. Yet
Wow.
after this coronavirus, I'm a huge fan of say the Japanese bow or the Indian namaste.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we'll never, as an American, get all the subtleties and everything along with it. But what I like about the handshake is you're greeting that other person and you're having eye contact with them and saying their name. I'd like to take us to the bow where you still have eye contact with the person. You're putting your hands in front of you and you're acknowledging them and saying their name. Think we could change habits here?
I believe that habits are hard to break.
Uh-huh.
But given uh, the implication of and the effect of this virus, there's a lot of things that are going to change.
Right.
Undoubtedly, some will be unwilling to change. But
Yeah.
when you have someone that's unwilling, let's say, hey, I come across someone and I'm all for the Japanese. I've been to Japan many times, and I love the culture there.
Yeah.
And I don't mind putting my hands together and all of that. But
Yeah.
the moment that someone finds an opposition to the handshake, they'll realize that, oh wow. So that one could easily go away.
Yeah, and I'd like the bow better than the elbow tap because the elbow tap is just so hard to coordinate. Imagine you're in a group of people, you can handshake all around, you could bow all around, but elbow tapping,
I've seen the
you
foot
know,
tapping. I've seen all kinds of stuff. It was fun, but
uh,
that's interesting. How much of our day to day language, our expressions of language, uh, how much of that will change because of this?
yeah,
And in America, um, we're more prone to expression of touch. And that may be affected in a big way. So I hope some people are expecting that and are preparing for that. Uh,
yeah.
and it's interesting you talk about going abroad and how important those briefings are. What do you see the importance of language and leadership? Because leaders are used to communicating for the masses. So how what importance you see there between those two?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the United States is leaders expecting everybody in the company to speak English. And so
Wow.
before all this crisis, we were talking to some manufacturing companies who were having a heck of a time hiring people to work on the manufacturing floor. And there was a whole initiative, a workforce initiative about hiring non English speakers. And the knee jerk reaction from a lot of traditional leaders is, okay, well, we'll do that and then we'll bring them in and teach them English. Well, not everybody has a propensity for language, but they may have propensity for they may be very skilled in working on a manufacturing floor, and you don't want to lose that talent or the knowledge of how to do that. So we're able to go into companies and help them figure out how do you attract, how do you retain, and then how do you promote those employees so they really feel part of a culture and can excel, even if they don't know English. And there's lots of little ways to do that. And Boston Centerless is a company that's based just north of Boston that is fabulous. They have a manufacturing floor, and how they've been able to pull people in and promote them and bring them along when they get the knowledge. And then the other way is leaders thinking, oh, I'm in the United States. There's enough of a market here. Why would I even need to think about going global or marketing in other languages?
Right.
And, I've always been passionate about how connected the globe is, how the people of the world, this virus has blown me away about just how connected we are.
Oh, yes.
And the companies that are selling into China right now, they've got a leg up. I mean, China's starting to open the market now. So I'm saying if you're looking for an opportunity, figure out how to market online or translate your materials on your website and target the Chinese market, because they're going to start ramping up their economy quicker than we are.
Right.
So we have all sorts of suggestions on our website, knowledge on how to do this and how to go about thinking about it, whether you need to translate your whole website or really just target down the customers you're doing. So I think it's a whole, don't just say, oh, you've got to speak English, but how do you speak the language of your audience so you can speak to more people?
Yes, I've seen that be a huge hindrance in people's addressing potential customers, and especially in leadership. I knew I had a leader, and well, let's just say if your leader spoke different languages, and you had a diverse group, but as you stated, right, can actually do a great job in what they do, but maybe doesn't necessarily speak English. That would make you one of the best leaders that they've ever seen, because you have not only uh, stretched yourself out, because it's a huge stretch to go past your native tongue.
Yes.
You have to be adventurous. You have to say, well, I want to do this because first for myself. Now I'm blessed. I speak English and Spanish, so at least I have those two. And I expose myself, uh, although be it was with the Navy, to different
Yeah.
cultures, different
Yeah.
countries, different languages. And I've even incorporated that in my home. Every time I like to cook, so every time we cook a dish from a foreign country, I play the music from that land while we're
Oh,
cooking.
that's
Yeah,
great.
while we're cooking
I
and we're
love
doing,
that.
I expose my children to an international flair because I had that while I was in the Navy. Uh, but that's something, since I believe leadership starts at home.
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
I made sure that we do that at home, and we go around the world, several times a month, and never leave the house.
I am
But
so going to put that in because I've been cooking. I've gotten some recommendation. Well, in the US, we say when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Well, I posted this a LinkedIn post about that, and somebody from Lindsay Eek, who I'm connected with on LinkedIn, he said, oh, and here in Nigeria, we say when life gives you peppers, make pepper soup. So we ended up making pepper soup. It's absolutely fantastic. I got a recipe off of Google. So I should have played Nigerian music, but next time I will. But I want to go back to the point you were making about leaders, like they can stretch themselves to learn another language. Like that's a high bar to set.
mhm,
I think there are simpler things to do. And when we have a speaker who is speaking at a conference to an audience that may have an interpreter, either headset or consecutive interpreters, we coach them, if they're open to it, on how to speak so the interpreters have an easier time in making sure that their message is given clearly.
right,
Number one is don't use sports references. I mean, if I talk about, the LPM shot a hard one to the top right corner and then he ran around to the X spot. Do you even know what sport that is? No. My kids played lacrosse. I didn't either, you know. So the long pole midi, he shot to the top right corner and then ran behind the net to try to catch it. Yeah, I mean, if I say something like that, the interpreter is lost and then they've lost the audience and it's really hard to get back in. So even if you talk about hitting a home run, you know, for a company in the United States, other countries don't play baseball. So number one is don't use sports references. Not everybody's going to get them. Number two is avoid humor, because you and I both know that humor doesn't translate across
Oh,
languages.
yes.
Yeah, and you also know that you're fully bilingual when you start getting the humor in the other language.
Right.
Um, Number three is to speak very clearly in shorter sentences, not rambling sentences, so that people, if it is their second language, they can understand or the interpreter can catch it. And so those are things that even if you're a, you know, monolingual person, that you can do, that an interpreter can help you. Now, the next step is a friend of mine from business school, Gary Giles. He was working for a company where he was going over to present, I think it was Korean. Yeah, Korean. And he asked us not just to translate it into Korean, but give the phonetic pronunciation. So when he got up in front of the crowd, he could read the phonetic. I mean, he practiced so he could deliver it effectively, but he you know, warmed the crowd by trying to speak the language of the audience. So he could, that was a good way to connect.
Oh, that's wonderful. So basically, knowing your audience, as in all things when you're speaking, is one of the most important things.
Yes,
And what really translates. So it begs to do homework. It begs to have
yes,
somebody coordinate these things where you are not potentially gonna go from a great speech or a great event or a great meeting to a disaster, right? But
right.
because you didn't know. Uh,
Yeah, we've seen that before where we've tried to coach the CEO and just up there, long talk, not clear thoughts, lots of sports references, and the audience just didn't get it. Now that's another thing that I'd add. So those are things that you can do, and then the preparation beforehand if you are speaking with an interpreter is to provide any materials you have in advance, because the interpreters want to do a good job. So they're going to go through your PowerPoint presentation or your materials or your website to make sure that they're prepared. And if there's any industry specific terminology, they're going to read it. And then before the event actually starts, talk with the interpreter. You know, you might be able to have hand signals like, hey, slow it down a little bit so the speaker knows, or you're doing a good job, or you have to figure out whatever's appropriate and make sure
Right.
you're using signals that make sense to both of you and aren't offensive.
those are very important in terms of leadership and how you execute. And uh, you know, we've spoken about these things that have come up or potential things that have come up. What have you seen that is like the greatest issue in business and language? What have you come across throughout your 15 years of, you know, with the company and doing this for a long time as a maybe a recurring thing that business owners and leaders need to be aware of?
Do I have to pick one or can I pick two?
You can pick two.
Okay, number one is, well, in no particular order. One is just the fear of doing it. People have this fear of, I don't know the language, so how am I going to make sure that the quality is good? And so therefore they don't do anything. And then the second problem is quality. Sometimes people will get over the fear and then they go out and they say, well, I don't know how to judge quality, so I'm going to shop on price. And then they may get an employee, or they may get a distributor, or they may get an unqualified person to do any of the you know, translation work, Interpreting is spoken, and we were just talking about interpreters. Now I'm going to switch over to translation, which is written. And so they'll go for a low-cost, unqualified person to do the translation. And that can run into problems. Like, you know, you're bilingual. What do you think about Google Translate?
It's a hit or miss.
Right.
Yeah,
So you spend all this time putting together your website, and then somebody pops the Google Translate plugin in, and you got a hit or miss translation. Like, why not be strategic about it
right,
and think about who your audience is? What are you trying to say to them? What do you know, what's what's your message?
right,
And then narrow down that content and make it an affordable project, and then you can measure what's coming from it, because we got all the online tools to do that now.
right.
So I'd have to say the two which are intertwined is fear and then not knowing how to judge quality. And that's where we've come in to help a lot of people.
It's funny how that translates across the board as far as execution, right? Fear will freeze you. It
Yeah.
will it will pose other challenges to come up, and you, while you're focusing on that, here comes the other, here comes the other. But not only will it freeze you, it will make you paranoid about the quality and all of that. And it's funny how that those two are coupled throughout the life cycle of a business. They'll come together in phases, or maybe not the one after the other or in any specific order, but those are the two things that can really stop you from growing, from being successful, from doing a lot of things in business. So it's
Yeah.
great that you highlighted those two. Um, and so with challenges, right? And we all have them in business or in trying to create a business or develop a business. What would you say are the top three things you would tips for leaders concerning language, communication, and things of that nature?
Yeah. So I'd say the first thing is really be open to marketing across languages. And you can go global or you can stay in the United States for that. So did do you know what country has the first and the second largest Spanish speaking population in it?
No, I would be only assuming.
Well, I happen to have some answers for
All
you.
right, all right.
Okay, so Mexico
Hmm.
has the largest Spanish speaking population, easy to export. It's right across the border. You
Right.
can do North American packaging and you can sell to Mexico. You add French onto it, you can go to Canada. So you're not even leaving North America. The country with the second largest Spanish speaking population is the United States.
Which would have been my two guesses.
Oh, good,
It would
good.
have,
Okay.
would have been. I was gonna say the U.S. and obviously Mexico's the second largest, but
Yeah, yeah. And so, do you ever watch Telemundo?
we have in the past, but not.
Yeah.
Uh, we've steered away from TV for a while.
Oh, from
But
TV.
but yeah,
Okay.
but we're well aware of it. Yeah.
Right. And so when you go on Telemundo, one of my favorite things to do is watch the Olympics on English speaking TV and then go over to Spanish speaking TV. And I watch the ads because they're the same ads going on. It's just the ads have been modified to be in Spanish because the advertisers on there know that there's so many Spanish speakers in the
Right.
United States. Even if they're bilingual, they'll watch the Spanish speaking TV. I mean, I love it. The kids are learning to speak Spanish. And so the advertisers are on there, and you've got all the major car manufacturers. You've got, all the Procter and Gamble, the General Mills products. You've got the fast food restaurants. So, companies that have something that can sell out to consumers, just look at what you can do right here in the United States, or like I was talking, add the French and Spanish to it, and you've got the North American market without even leaving here. So I think that's the first thing is just open your eyes to it and look into it. The other thing for companies that just do it, you know, hats off to Nike for having the just do it,
Right.
is companies grow faster, bring more to their bottom line, pay their employees higher, last longer. So you become a much stronger company if you learn how to export and sell across languages. So I think, number one is just do it. Um, and when you do it, don't make translation just a separate part of your company. Build it into your culture. Hire people that look differently from you. Build in diversity and inclusion, because those people that you hire that are different from you are going to bring new ideas. They're going to connect to different people on social media. They're going to bring improvements to your product. So that's a good way to become better at it. And the third I'd have to say is hire the right agency or people to do your translations appropriately. You don't want to mess around with quality, because you spend so much time developing your marketing message and doing all your strategy and then building or coming up with your services that you're going to do. If you're going to reach out across other languages, make sure you get the right people or agency to do your translation. And there's stuff on our website about, the pluses and minuses of hiring employees or distributors. And then what do you look for in hiring the right agency? Bigger may not be better. You may be better off with the smaller one, but if you've got special technical requirements, what are you going to look for there? So have the right people and then stay consistent with whoever is doing your translation.
Wow, those are all wonderful. And as you were talking and talking about the Olympics, I quickly remembered, because you said that you watch Telemundo, when the earthquakes were at its peak, and believe it or not, they're still going on in Puerto Rico. They're still going on.
Oh, wow.
It's just that it's not the biggest news, right? So they've been dealing with this since December of last year. But I remember when me and my wife were looking at the news, that they put an ad, and in the ad was a lady and her child at a grocery store. Now, and any other time this ad would have been great, but the aisles started shaking. The aisles started shaking, and it was because the product was so powerful. Well, but they ran it while Puerto Rico, a Spanish speaking country, no doubt looking at that, and while people who are in America, they have families there, they
Yeah.
were running this ad at the same time as they were going through this disaster. And the
Wow.
first thing that struck me was how inappropriate to
Right.
put an ad out like this. And so that little thing, that, I mean, someone in that whole entire company could have said, hey, we can't run that ad. They're suffering major earthquakes down there right now.
I know. Yeah.
And so simple, so something that would have probably, like, I'll tell you how I interpret it was, they didn't do their due diligence to see if this was the proper time to put it out. And so whatever, I don't even remember what the product is, because initially in my head, I just locked it out.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not even going to get that,
Because it's so
because
insensitive.
it was
Yeah.
insensitive to the time. And so leaders, if and this is just a general call to leaders, if you have a product, if you want the proper translation, if you want the proper interpretation, if you want the proper message to be put out, and you're looking into a global arena, or just even just another country type of arena with your product, I implore you to reach out to Rapport International with Wendy and have them make it right, because you do not want to be the other commercial that comes out with the wrong interpretation. And it
Yeah.
wasn't even that the product was wrong and that it wasn't a good product. It was just insensitive. And those are the pitfalls, the true pitfalls of language and interpretation and
Hmm.
translation that we as leaders must be wary of,
Yes.
because it could mean the last of our company. It really could.
Yeah.
So for all leaders
Yeah.
out there, I encourage you to reach out to Wendy and Rapport International. Wendy, thank you so much for the time you've given us, the advice, the tips, the backgrounds. I am sure that our community, our listeners will be enriched by what you have shared. And so I want to thank you again for being with us.
Muchas gracias, Enrique.
De nada. Okay, folks, until next week, success to you.